has a sister facility, Area 52, and it's a place to see.
Now, the October surprise is in 1980, when Reagan and Bush were running against Carter and Mondale. As you know, the hostages were still in Iran, in Tehran, and then Bush took an airplane to Paris to meet not with the Khomeini, but a representative of the Khomeini, and the deal was if the Khomeini would delay the release of the hostages until Reagan's inauguration, that the Reagan-Bush administration would supply him, the Iranian regime, unlimited guns and ammunition throughout their administration, which would go from 1980 till 1988. My part in that was to deliver those guns and ammunition from Tel Aviv to Tehran. The reason I brought this up is that big sheath of papers over there is the details of who was flying and how they pulled the whole thing off. The way they pulled it off is Bush left Saturday night on a back 111 jet, which only took about 6 or 7 hours to get there. He only spent about 4 or 5 hours in the meeting, and then he was flown back in an SR-71 from a base in France to McGuire Air Force Base, and it only took an hour and 14 minutes. That way he was able to show up for a tennis appointment that he had on Sunday, and that the press would have not known of the lapse in time or the trip. And as it turned out, they were elected and they supplied these guns and ammunition. And that was, you know, part of the Iran-Contra, but Congress never went back as farther than 1985 to find out when it originally started. And when I moved to Egypt in 1981, that was going to be my job, was to take those arms and ammunition from from Tel Aviv to Tehran. They were coming into Tel Aviv from Zaragoza, our Air Force base in Spain, and Mossad was handling the whole thing. The reason I never did fly a flight, and the reason was the first airplane in was a Argentinian CL-44, and what that they wanted to do was use an old turboprop airplane to be sure everything went fine and there were going to be no problems. And for some reason it got shot down on its way out, and it got shot down over Russia about 40 miles south of Yerevan, and which is well inside Russia. And the Mossad couldn't figure out how the pilots got off course. They were on their way out. They had dropped a load, or already dumped the arms and ammunition off, and they finally figured out that what must have happened is the pilots were intercepted by the Russian MiGs, who knew what was going on and didn't like it. And the pilots thought, well, might as well follow them because we got nothing on board. They can't prove anything. And then as soon as they got them over Russia, just shot their ass down, which was a message to Mossad, hey, we don't want this to go on. So that big sheath of papers, was the history behind the October surprise. There were 2 books, one Gary Sick and Barbara Honecker, each wrote books about it. Congress went as far as to actually launch an official investigation in 1990, but it was all covered up because, nobody wanted to go back that far, hear any more stories about that thing. But the hostages did spend, October, November, December, an extra 4 months there.
So Reagan could be elected.
Right.
Incredible stuff.
And a lot of people know this story, but it's been, 30 years, and pretty much everybody has found it. The only reason I brought it up is because I'm putting the history there of who the pilots were and